Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's session of the CBS Leadership Speaker Series. My name is Emily Flannery. I'm a member of the class of 2021 of Columbia Business School and the co-chair of AliCon, CBS's Tech Conference. It is my pleasure to officially welcome my fellow students, faculty members, staff, and esteemed panelists this evening. The CBS Leadership Speaker Series was established to offer students access to those at the very center of business, giving us an opportunity to learn from CEOs, founders, and distinguished business leaders. Tonight, we'll hear from Dean McGlarris, Professor Paul Glasserman, and Sam Palmisano. After an introduction of our panelists by Dean McGlarris, Professor Glasserman will lead Mr. Palmisano in conversation about his professional experience. Guests will then have a chance to participate in a live Q&A session. Please use the raise your hand function to signal that you have a question. When it is your turn to speak, we will turn your video microphone on so you can interact face-to-face with the speakers. If you prefer to ask your question via the Q&A button, please do so, and we'll be fielding those as well. Without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce Dean Costis McGlarris, the David and Lynn Silson Professor of Business at Columbia Business School.
All right. Thank you, Emily, for welcoming us this evening and for your leadership at AliCon. I really enjoyed the conference, actually, a few months ago. One of the last things we did in person before we went into the lockdown. So welcome all of you, and thank you for joining us this evening. It's my pleasure to introduce our wonderful speakers, and I know they will provide for a very lively and insightful conversation. Sam Palmisano, and my good friend and colleague, Professor Paul Glasserman. I'm not going to take too much time. I'm just going to say a few words for each of our speakers today, and then leave it to them to carry us through. So Sam is the chairman now of the Center for Global Enterprise, which is a private nonprofit research institution established to educate societal stakeholders, this looking at leaders from private sector, public sector, and academia, on really thinking about the globally integrated economy and its promise for a better future. And in particular, I like the word stakeholders into that description because it's a complex problem, and the role of businesses in addressing societal problems is becoming increasingly important. Prior to joining as chairman of this organization, of course, you may know that Sam spent 39 years at IBM, ending with 8 years as chairman, president, and chief executive officer of this amazing company. Under his leadership, IBM did achieve record financial performance and introduced us to things like Watson that we may have all heard about, as well as the Smarter Planet agenda, which I think relates to the things that you're doing now. As a natural continuation. Sam has received many awards, but I'd like to highlight one. He was the inaugural recipient of the Deming Cup that is given by the Deming Center for Quality, Productivity, and Competitiveness. And that was back in 2010. And as an anecdote that I remember back then, I had your son as my student in my class. In his second year, which was it was nice. So recently, Sam has also been involved with the government in helping essentially guide some of the interesting and intricate discussions. He was in the Presidential Commission as a vice chair, focusing on national cybersecurity. Prior to that, he co-chaired a task force for defending an open, global, secure, and resilient internet for the Council of Foreign Relations. He sits on many boards, including ExxonMobil and the American Express Corporation, and he advises many organizations and institutions, including the NFL. That must be interesting, and the National Museum for African American History and Culture. So thank you, Sam, for joining us. With Sam, joining Sam to moderate tonight's conversation is Paul Glasserman, the Jack R. Anderson Professor of Business, and a member of the Decision, Risk, and Operations Division, and my good friend and colleague for the entire duration that I've been at the university for 22 years. Professor Glasserman research addresses risk management, derivative securities, statistics, operations, Paul has taught courses in statistics, quantitative finance, fintech. He has won many, many teaching awards and research awards, pretty much every award in our field. Prior to joining Columbia, Paul spent some time at Bell Labs, and he has held visiting positions at the Federal Reserve, at the Office of Financial Research, and in the U.S. Treasury Department. Paul has received many, many, as I said, academic distinctions throughout his career, and he's a true asset of our school for all of us, and he's involved pretty much in every aspect, nook and cranny, of the business school. So thank you both for joining us today. I personally look forward to this amazing discussion, and I'll leave it to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Kostis. I'm really thrilled to have this opportunity. So as Kostis mentioned, Sam was the inaugural recipient of the business school's Deming Cup Award, and I attend the award ceremony every year. And I've always had the impression that while people are very happy to get an award from Columbia Business School, what they're really excited about is getting the award that Sam Palmisano inaugurated. So really nice to have the opportunity to chat with you. Obviously, a lot going on in the world, a lot to talk about, and we'll get to all of that. But maybe we could start by going back to 1973. 1973, the Watergate scandals unfolding. It's the year of the OPEC oil embargo, big shock to the country. And it's the year that Sam Palmisano starts at IBM. How did the future look to young Sam back then?
Well, it's interesting, as you know, we were in school during a period of time when there's tremendous turmoil on campus, as you might imagine, right? There was obviously the reactions to the war, and there were kind of student protests and all these things. And I attended a school called Johns Hopkins, which has a thing called the Applied Physics Lab, which did a lot of nuclear research. There was a lot going on in the neighborhood, right? So there was always turmoil throughout our years on the campus. Watergate, I happened to be from Baltimore, Washington, so I actually was in D.C. when the night that Nixon resigned. So we were very much part of the whole thing. But as a kid, you look at the world and you're just totally optimistic about the world. And so I was very upbeat. I also had a need to get back to work in a hurry because I had to pay off all my financial loans. And I was a financial loan student, plus I had a scholarship, an academic scholarship. That's how I could afford to go to Johns Hopkins. But anyway, and so I had to get a job. It wasn't like I could just hang around for a while. And I avoided being drafted because my draft number was 4, which meant I was going to go off and fight in the war, which is why I never went to graduate school, because I figured I don't need to have an advanced degree to get shot at in a swamp, So anyway, that's the background. But the net of the whole thing is that, you were pretty positive, even though things were tough. Right? And, and it was a tough job market, but you never thought about it because you're a kid, right? You're just optimistic and you think something good's going to happen for you. And I think it's probably the same for a lot of the young people today. The world's terrible, but at the end of the day, they think, hey, I'm young and I'm smart, I'm well educated, and, I'm going to go make a name for myself.
There's a rumor out there that music and football were alternative career possibilities at that point.
Well, they're very limited career opportunities. I played the backup band for the Temptations when I was in high school. So that was fun. But I learned a lot. I was 17 years old in the green room with the Temptations. And going to a Catholic boys' high school, I never had seen some of the things I witnessed in between our breaks and things like that. It was a little bit eye-opening for me. I grew up very, very fast. Football was sort of a lark. I was playing Division III football. It's like the Ivy League football. But anyway, and I got an offer to try for the Oakland Raiders. But friends of mine had actually left from Division III football that went out for teams like the Baltimore Colts and stuff, who were in skilled positions and receivers and that kind of stuff, told me that I was an offensive center and a linebacker. They said the position I was playing, these guys, I'd be dead in 2 weeks, and I should just lose some weight and get a job. So I think that was good advice.
Okay, so no to the Temptations, no to the Raiders, yes to IBM. Did you imagine back then that you'd be staying there for 39 years?
No, I mean, like a lot of kids, in those days, I mean, business schools weren't as mature, quite honestly, and most of us thought you could go to IBM or Procter and Gamble. This was kind of the thinking, and you'd get the equivalent of what you needed to be successful in business. Both, I mean, IBM was more technology, P&G was more brand marketing, but these, and then Xerox, there were good programs that we all understood, and so you felt that way. That was your alternative. I never thought I'd last 39 and a half years, right? But the reason why because people have asked me, well, how did you last that long? So I thought after 4 or 5 years, I'd do something else, whatever. But the reason what I learned quickly at IBM, it was so big and so global that I could do anything in technology anywhere in the world. And so why would I want to leave, right, and go off to do something else, and be more limited in the opportunities that were presented to me. So that was sort of what drove it more than anything else. Was I kept changing jobs, and I worked in Asia. I worked in IBM Japan. I did every business at IBM before I became CEO. That was part of my development that Gerster put me through with a guy before me. It wasn't an easy way to get there, but I certainly knew the company inside and out.
So you mentioned that Gerstner at some point was giving you these opportunities, but before you got to that stage, between 1973 and that moment, you must have done a lot of things right to get noticed and to advance your career. What were some of the things that, as you look back, were smart moves, good calls that you made that others might learn from?
I guess I've had a different way of thinking about things. And not that I was sort of an inside outsider, people said when I finally became CEO, but the fact of the matter was that I looked at jobs as a place to learn more, to fill in a skill gap that I had, right? I didn't view it as I got to always advance. I mean, a lot of people think, and I was mentored by a lot of people. I mentor a lot of people. I still do, and I did at the time. Everyone thinks they need to be moving up, either in position level or size of organization or compensation. Those variables that people measure is up, right? I viewed it as, where can I learn the most? When I was in basically sales and marketing up through running the big portion of the country, the southern part of the country. But they said, well, you should do something within that path. And I went into this area called special pricing, special bidding, selling to copy your business or whatever. And people say, well, that's a little crazy. I mean, compared to, I was one of these fast track guys, but I learned a ton about product costing, the allocation systems, pricing for special deals, selling an asset in IBM called the copy your business to punish Shiruku. But anyway, and then I bounced into some other area, but I always viewed things like going to Japan. I was in IBM Japan. The classic path would have been the Asian organization where most of the non-locals would be working, right, where you didn't have to have natural language skills, native language skills. But, I just felt that if I went into IBM Japan, there was a huge portion of IBM, still is today, like Germany, US, Japan, UK, et cetera. They were the biggest countries, Italy. Now you'd add China and add some others to the list, but back then they would have been the major geographic centers. I just felt that, it's going to be awkward and hard, but I'll learn more, So I just viewed it as, and it's like when I came back from Japan, my mentor, my career manager, when you go overseas, you have a career manager. My career manager was the CEO and chairman of the board because I was his chief of staff, right? So I had lots of opportunities to come back, obviously, since you're the guy, the CEO is your career manager, he could have placed me. But I went to an organization that had literally, we just being formed called IBM Services. We had 3 customers. We had nothing. When I retired, we had $67 billion in revenue and 205,000 people in it. So I mean, I guess you could call it a startup, but it was, again, people said, well, they're going to make you president of a division. Don't you want that? I said, yeah, it's just same old stuff. I've been doing product sales and marketing my whole life, right? So this is different. IBM doesn't have professional services. They have product services, what have you, right? It's an opportunity to create something from within and, give it a shot, right? See what you can learn. So I think the lesson for me anyway, I share with a lot of people, including my own family, is think about jobs where you can learn a skill that you don't have, a skill that you need to continue to do better, even if it's just in life, not necessarily from a professional perspective, but always look at yourself as adding your skill set.
And how long were you in Japan for?
2.5 years. we wanted to stay longer, which is a funny story.
The family was with you?
Yeah, the whole time. Yeah, they came, and once I could get them into school, Paul, you got to get them into school. So I was there a few months without them because they were finishing up the school. I had 4 children, but they were finishing up they were lower school, either kindergarten, nursery school, and then, in the 5th and 6th grade were the older ones. But anyway, so we didn't want to pull them out. So they came over in the summertime. The whole family, it's a great family. I mean, it's a great family thing to do, to live overseas. They learned so much. The cultural differences are so great. We traveled so much. They saw parts of the world they never would have seen, I think, if we hadn't lived there. So the family thing is, I tell them, do it. I mean, I don't just do it, right? It's wonderful. As long as it works out for your spouse and the kids and schools and education, but if we can make it work, make it work. But, when I was coming back, they were, they were offering me these opportunities. And I just said, hey, look, I'd much rather do this unstructured thing and see. And it ended up, in a way, what happened was John Akers was my mentor, and he was CEO. I've been back, I don't know. Oh, I know. I'll tell you this funny story. We're having a board meeting in Tokyo, and after the dinner, and I did this big presentation on Japanese competition, all this stuff, whatever. After the board dinner, John and the I guess in those days you would call him lead director, the guy Jim Burke, who was running Johnson & Johnson at that time, grabbed me in the parking lot after the dinner and said, hey, you need to come back now. I said, well, I've only been here like 2.5 years. Now I signed up for like 3 to 5 years. And we liked it. Business was fine. And my wife was having a great time. The kids were good. And he's a great line. He goes, no, Sam, you don't understand. Things are not going to be as you know them forever. And I need you to come back and start this thing called IBM Services. So you should listen to me and come back. He was gone March the following year, so obviously he knew what was going. He saw what was about to happen, and he took care of me in the transition for sure.
That's great. So you've told us some of the things you did right as you look back, things you might have done differently, advice you would have given yourself if you'd known.
Oh, there's a lot of mistakes. I used to be. I'll give you a great example of a mistake. I was interviewing for the chief of staff for the chairman, the CEO of IBM, and he called me in. First of all, he looked at my background. And he goes, how did we ever hire you? Because I was I graduated with the liberal arts, Bachelor of Social Sciences, whatever, right? I said, well, you have to remember that I was a math major to my sophomore year. I got my draft number, it was 4. And I realized getting C's and B's in math, and getting shot in Vietnam was probably not a good career path. So I took up economics and all this other stuff, figured I'm going to get a job. He goes, all right. But then he goes, but you have this reputation. I go, what's your reputation? He goes, you're disruptive. You're disrespectful authority, right? And I said, well, I'm not disrespectful authority. I just have a different point of view. And sometimes I articulate my point of view. He goes, well, maybe we should work on that while you're here. So, it says a lot, right? Now I got there because as I was pushing the system, we did some things that had never been done on IBM before. So I established a little bit of a positive reputation having done those things. But at the same time, I could have done them in a more collegial fashion. In today's environment, this was, 30 some years ago, right, where things were quite different. Today's environment, you'd have so many issues with being as direct as I was in many meetings. You'd have to really work on how you articulated your points of view. You'd have to be much more socially aware of your colleagues and that kind of stuff. So, no doubt about it. And I learned a lot of that in Asia, by the way. A lot of those rough edges, when you work at IBM Japan, which is a very polite system, and you're very careful of offending anybody in your peer group. I really learned the importance of being able to be more collegial, worked in the WASI process, the RIE process, et cetera, et cetera.
So despite some rough edges, we can fast forward to 2002, you're CEO of IBM. How did you go about formulating your strategy? And you took IBM in a somewhat different direction in your time there. Did you come in with a clear sense of, I know which way I want to go? Was that a process of developing the strategy that you wanted to implement?
Well, I had opinions, but I had to validate the opinions because I ran all the businesses. And I mean, the one that was probably the most, I guess, at the time controversial, now it looks like we made the right call, was selling the PC business, right? But I ran the PC business. I understood the economic value created in the PC business, other than for Microsoft and Intel. If you were Dell or IBM or HP or whomever, Toshiba, there was very little value. You were part of this feudal system. They controlled all the profit. They would distribute it based upon Intel inside dollars, et cetera, right? So at the end of the day, you knew the economics of the business, but you weren't sure about the technology. So, but what we did was we had a great group in IBM Research. And I asked them to do kind of give us a projection, which they do every year now. They take a 10-year view of technology, and they come in, they argue where they think technology will be. And at that time, this is like 2002, they were arguing that basically the PC, client-server platform, will no longer be the center of computing in the IT industry. It's going to be other things. It's going to be like things like sensors, cameras, maybe phones. The iPhone came out in 2007, right? But it won't be the PC, and it's going to be all these large data sets, because all this stuff will be really computers generating data. So that's where we need to go. And I realized that, gosh, we not only were in the PC business, we were in every element of the PC business: the power supplies, the disk drives, the screens, the panels, and all that stuff, right? So we would have stranded assets everywhere if we sold the PC business. So we had to sell everything along the way before we actually, as you know, announced in 2005 selling the business to Lenovo. So there were a lot of strategic decisions we made. We also remixed more in the software and less in the hardware. That was another thing we did. We did 112 software acquisitions over my tenure. Not big ones, we tend to do, I'll call them adjacent space point acquisitions that would fill in our technical gaps in the portfolio. But that was probably the most visible one, was selling the PC business. So I got a lot of criticism at the time. Yeah. But at the end of the, in the mid-cycle portion of the job, a lot of people were taking shots at me on TV and everything else for doing it. And then when I retired, they thought I was probably IBM made the right call, right?
Now, another big one early on, I guess right at the beginning, was bringing in PwC Consulting. Was that already in the works?
Well, I ran services, and Ginny, the lady that replaced me, she was doing service with another gentleman from Australia named Doug Elix. And basically what we realized was we had very good technology services, but we had very little business process knowledge. And Pricewaterhouse had very good business process knowledge, obviously would be weak in technology given the orientation of the consulting business. So fundamentally, it was a good fit. HP, as you know, tried to buy it for over $15 billion. That fell apart for whatever sets of reasons, and we were able to buy the asset for about $3.5 billion net of cash. So we got a good deal, and obviously it wasn't accretive. I was accretive like in 6 seconds, given what we paid for the business. But nonetheless, it filled the tech. It wasn't about we were already number one in all these technology services, so we weren't trying to be even bigger in services. It was it was a skill set we didn't have, and we felt the best way to get that skill set. Because if we thought about what you see today happening, we really believed that technology was going to be embedded in the process itself. Now you call it AI. We weren't smart enough to call it artificial intelligence in those days. But now I'm going to build up to Jeopardy and Watson. But we just believed, if you looked at technology, that you were just going to embed the knowledge of logic in the process itself, whether it's a real-time supply management, your supply chains, whatever it happens to be, because of all the sources of data that you were going to have. And we needed to have that business process insight. That's why we bought Pricewaterhouse. And Ginny did a good job.
What about blending the cultures? That must have been a challenge.
It was not easy. And Ginny did a nice job. She really did. And what we did, we learned is that we learned through the Lotus acquisition, quite honestly, which is well before we ever did Pricewaterhouse, that you have to integrate the cultures immediately. And if you can't, don't do the deal. We made the mistakes. It isn't like we just studied this in school or something. We had our missteps along the way before we got to this point. So what we did was we left the line people that were running the big geographies for Pricewaterhouse. They all stayed in place, but all the back office, the financial systems, the HR systems, we consolidated all that immediately. So, but the cultural change was, if you think about it, they were a partnership that literally just at the end of the year just split up the money, right? It was just a partnership, and that's how they did it. Now you're in a public company, so all these things that they have to do matter. Like, you can't put expenses that you charge the client, you can't bill it into the revenue. You have to separate it out, right? They said, wait a minute, no, our revenue is this. Well, no, because all you're doing is have to pass through the customer expense for your travel. You can't do that in a public company. The accounting won't let us do those sorts of things. So there were a lot of those kinds of things that occurred. But the key was that we were able to keep the people excited about IBM. That we did this two ways. There's an obvious one called the economic way, which when we acquired PricewaterhouseCoopers, the stock was, I think, 57 or 58. And when I retired, it was 217. So there's a lot of holding power in the equity. But beyond that, what we did was we said, you guys could be really excited if you understood what goes on in IBM research. So we formed these teams by industry, and we aligned them with these really seriously smart technology people in research. And they got all excited because at the end of the day, what they really wanted to do was do great things for clients. And they saw all the stuff in IBM research and the technology labs. And they said, man, if I could really just bring that to the client, I mean, that's what they live for if you're in the consulting business. And so there was a passion for what we were doing, plus obviously the holding power. Luckily, the stock kept going up, so we had a lot of holding power in the equity.
So I'm glad you brought up research. The whole question of how you manage research, I think, is a really interesting one. As Kostis mentioned before, my first job out of graduate school was at Bell Labs, and I think of Bell Labs and IBM Yorktown as two great examples of corporate research labs of maybe the whole 20th century. But it's not easy managing research. You need to take a long-term view. You need to be able to give people a certain amount of freedom and flexibility, and you don't necessarily know what's going to pay off. But obviously, within a public corporation, you've got a lot of accountability. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about how you approach the problem of overseeing.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, like I said, we really valued, I think in a technology company, the fact that you can outsource research and buy it when you need it. There are a lot of tech companies that have been successful doing that, but they haven't been in what I'll call high-end enterprise tech, which is truly complicated. We were running these global currency systems where they're trading like trillions of dollars a day. You can't be wrong. You can't be off by a penny, right? So we were doing serious stuff. We were doing serious stuff in healthcare and diagnostic systems and things like that where people could die. So you just can't say, well, I'm going to go outsource that. There's a startup out there. There's 10 people out there. I'll do an acqui-hire, right? No, we believe that you had to have that core capability internally. Now, the question is, how do you keep it engaged? Because we did a lot of things in the past at IBM. You probably don't realize this stuff, but like the laser, the blue laser you use now in the laser surgery for your eyes, that was invented by IBM. In fact, we actually, I'm positive, we sold the patents to Columbia, the hospital, because we didn't want to get into healthcare. In fact, I know we did. And our first research lab was at Columbia University in New York City. Watson Jr. established it at Columbia, as you know, right? So, we had the relationship. Think the hip surgery, the robots for hip surgery, we called it RoboDoc. It's the same sort of thing. But they were just distractions from the core business. We actually used the laser for disk drives and etching ones and zeros on iron oxide, but put that aside. So the RoboDoc was not really, it was robotics, but it certainly wasn't our core business. So the key was, how do you get it, to your point, how do you keep it connected, and how do you get the people motivated? And then how do you set the budget for research, right? That's always a big debate, the budget and how you pay the people. So what we would do is basically on the budgeting, I'll start with the big picture. It's about $6 billion a year, but we basically would, the research guy, the head of IBM research at the time was this guy, Paul Horn, and because McGrady was before him, that ran the National Science Academies, in those days. But anyway, Paul was there when I was CEO, and basically we said, okay, Paul, you tell us what percentage of revenue you think is right relative to benchmarks for research organizations in tech. And whatever now we negotiated, of course, but you pick the number and you pick how you want to pay the people, and then that's what it'll be. Well, revenue goes up, it goes up, but if revenue goes down, it goes down. Revenue goes up, compensation goes up. If it goes down, Paul. You've decided. We didn't, finance didn't shove this down your throat, right? So he said, no, that's the way it should be. So he brought his team along. That was important. The other thing we did, on the long-term research, we did this thing because you want accountability in the system, but you can't overmanage the people.
Right.
It's not like you're managing a line operational organization, as you well know. It's high. It's soft touches along the way. Like this guy Ferrucci did the Jeopardy machine. I'm working with this thing on the elemental cognition right now. Even to this day, it's you got to touch them. You can't just shove them. If you don't, you understand what I mean by that, right? So, but what we did, we said, okay, here's what we're going to do. We created this almost like an academic program, like a matching grant, but the business would put in half and research would put in half. Right. Now, I'm not getting the long term, I'm in the short term, 3 to 5 year stuff, not the 7 year, 10 year stuff.
Right.
Because we would fund that separately. But you guys, and then therefore in the budgeting process, that the way it would work, since the business units put half in and the research organization put half in, they would adjust because the business would say, well, this isn't working. I'm going to take it down or take it up or do whatever they were going to go do. And at least at the corporate level, we'd have to get in all those fights and that kind of stuff. Right. Now, the longer term stuff, we set aside about $6 billion, about 8 to 10% of the $6 billion we would set aside for long-term research. In semiconductors, the physics of the semiconductors, mathematics, and that became AI. But in software, a lot of the mathematical things, the algorithms, all that sort of stuff. Cloud, in the early days of cloud, horizontal computing. That was done separately because you really couldn't, as you know, you can't measure it. Early stage, you just don't know. I mean, you try to have some discipline in the process. You set milestones, and you do your best. But I can't say it's a precise. It's not like a precise budgeting process that you'd have in the rest of the organization.
As you look back, you think you got it about right in terms of the level of?
Yeah, no, I was happy with it. I mean, when the mistakes we made in research, quite honestly, was we were always too optimistic on both the absorption of the technology and the budget, the cost associated to get it into commercialization. The cases were always too positive. So what we did was every year when they came in with the 10-year outlook, we made research score themselves on their previous calls, and they did it themselves. I mean, we knew the answer, but Paul would stand up and say, well, we were too optimistic here and we spent too much money there. It's always the same anyway, right? So we, that way we had some level of accountability within that they also understood themselves. Now, I mean, we would have, needless to say, we'd adjust at the corporate level, for those things, because we always understood. They always felt that this stuff was going to happen much faster than it ever did, And we were laughing about stuff. I work in the VC world one day, and a guy I partnered with, this guy Jim Breyer, who was a great investor. He's the first investor in Facebook and things like that. We were talking about the early days of, we didn't call it SaaS. We had application platforms that you could subscribe to, right? I mean, we had like 30 centers around the world, HR, financial apps, bill materials, what have you, all that stuff, plan for stuff, whatever. And none of them made any sense, right? But then, we were laughing about it because now all of a sudden it's the hot platform, right? We happen to be like 15 years ahead of ourselves. So, but there's a classic example of, we say if you can take the complexity of computing, it really works for small and mid-sized companies, and this would be great, blah, 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 blah. Except there are all these other issues on how they buy and the supports they want, and, just basic support marketing problems that we hadn't thought about.
Maybe we could pivot a bit to your management style, how you like to hire people, how you like to motivate people who might be resistant to change.
Well, that's interesting because, hiring people, at the top, we didn't hire many people from the outside because we grew them from within. So I'll go back when I was younger. But I used to say to people, I just need you to have two things. Brains and integrity. I can teach you anything else. And they say, what do you mean? We will teach you anything else. They're just learned skills, right? So, but you got to be smart because there's a lot of smart people you work with in this place. And I mean, guys, as you know, at IBM Research had Nobel Prizes, so they weren't slouches. And that the technical community, they had their bona fides, and they would dismiss you pretty quickly if you could not keep up intellectually. That's just the culture. I mean, it wasn't harsh. It's just the way it was, right? They weren't arrogant about it. It was just a tough culture. Same with the finance community, really smart people. So you had to be smart, right? Needless to say. And you had to have ethics and integrity because there was no toleration for, and I say that to them because I'm not going to inspect you But if I doubt your ethics, you got to go. I'm not going to worry about it. What should I do? I don't trust them. Have a metrics to measure them. No, get out of here. Right? Just go. Right? If you mess around against our value system, all these things that people talk about today, forget it. You were gone. It was not like, it was like a 6-second process. Right? So, but everybody understood it. It wasn't meant to be harsh, but that's what was required, and it could teach you anything else. That was that. Towards the end, when I was appointing people to be senior vice presidents that could potentially become CEO or CFO or head of a researcher, head of HR, those kinds of jobs, right? Then it was different. We had a whole set of matrix skills where they had global experience because we were large. Most of our revenue people were outside the United States. So you had to have globalization. You had to be able to be passionate and persuade people to change, back to your point, people that are resisting the change. Without having line authority. So make the intellectual, much like an academic environment.
Right, I was just thinking that.
Make the intellectual case, to bring people to follow you like you're the Pied Piper, but you can't force them to come, right, at the end of the day. But you had to paint a vision as how to do it, which was really, really important. And they were two, and obviously you had to be able to make budgets and have financial performance and, like the basics, I call it being an executive, right? But they were kind of key ingredients to lead in this large, complicated place that we were trying to integrate. So what we did after, when I first took over, we changed the management system. We had this approach, which was, Lou came from McKinsey, and it was very much this line of business, vertical silo, totally integrated management system. But we felt that for us to serve the customers, we were going to have to clients integrate all this stuff, technology, services, software. It had to be integrated to solve their problem, not be these 6 organizations showing up in their office every day. So to get the senior team to come together to lead this transition from a vertical silo to a horizontal integration model, what I did was I established a compensation system, and I basically took a large pot of money, which what my predecessor was paid. I knew I was never going to get it anyway. Shouldn't be cynical. I never believed they were going to give me that much money. So I went to the comp committee and said, look, I'm not asking for more comp. I just want to reallocate the comp. And as long as you don't ask for anything more, they never care, right? So I reallocated it. Like, these guys had a bonus on leading the team, integrating IBM on a value system. And it was significant. It could change their earnings like 50 to 100% if they did that. If they didn't do it, well, it could have gone the other way. So it was a big piece of the money. It wasn't like 5 or 10%. And it brought the team together. So I didn't have to go argue with them and fight with them and all that sort of stuff to get them, especially when we were doing things like Smarter Planet, which required total integration, globalizing the resources to go after the opportunities in India and China and places like that, which all worked out for us. But there's a lot that had to go on within the system to move all the talent to those places and take it from other places. In that kind of, and move it into say Eastern Europe out of Germany was going to be a tough fight if you didn't have everybody buying in to that kind of a teamwork environment.
That's a great segue. Tell us about the Smarter Planet initiative.
Well, what happened with Smarter Planet, I'll get a little bit in the weeds, but not too much. When we were still in the PC business, the marketing communications guys were having a hissy fit because they said, look, IBM's brand's known for PCs. There's like the ThinkPad was a hugely successful brand. They associated Charlie Chaplin and the ThinkPad with IBM. And so what was going to replace that, right? I said, well, we'll just invent something else. See, well, it's not that easy. So of course we bang around for a while, right, needless to say. And then we came up with this thing. Again, it was started in research. We had all these first of a kind projects in research, like, smarter transportation where it wasn't polluting in Stockholm, like waterway, Galway Bay waterway systems, smart cities where crime was down in New York and places like that, smart traffic in Singapore. So we had all these projects around the world, and we realized that basically what they really were was big data. At the end of the day, Internet of Things, although, again, we rolled it out in 2008, so we're talking in 6 and 7, so a lot of these buzzwords really didn't exist, okay, right? But anyway. But it was fundamentally sensors, Internet of Things, massive data sets, apply algorithms, AI, and run it horizontally, cloud. Okay, right? We call it Internet data centers, cloud. Those kinds of things. And so that was the underpinning of what became Smarter Planet. Now the thing that was Smarter Planet that was a little bit more complicated was that, remember, we rolled this out in the financial crisis. So this gets back to, will we do that today? I mean, we rolled it out in the financial crisis. It was 4 days after Obama became president, was an elected president, not inaugurated, but elected. It was like November, I think 8th or something like that. I think it was 4th was the election date. I gave the speech at the Council of Foreign Relations in New York about how you could build a smarter world in a world that was just a mess, right? Lehman had gone under, the things were just collapsing everywhere, and the world was a mess. And so we rolled this thing out then. And as the head of marketing, he's now teaching at Yale. His name's John Arata. He goes through the case. He said, on very few metrics, this guy spent $4 billion, and it was a huge success. And they always ask me, how did you know? So I grew up in the industry. I just sort of knew. I knew IBM. I knew I spent 38 years there. I mean, but anyway, go run some more metrics if you want, but we're doing it, right? That was kind of the process. We didn't spend $4 billion all at once, but we spent $4 billion over the life of the program. So, but it was a huge success. I mean, if you go through, we rolled it out in the middle of a mess. It gave people hope. And then what happens is, 9 was a struggle. There was no revenue to be found. We shrank like 3 or 4%. The industry was down 10 or 15 or something. So the stock's not moving. 2010, best year in the history of IBM. 2011, best year in the history of IBM. Right? So the stock went from, I don't know, say 90 to 100. And it was like 215 or something like that when I retired. So you could see how it lifted. And then the hiring, I mean, because kids that today as well, even more so, want to be part of an organization that's doing the right things for society. And Smarter Plan was making the world a better place in lots of different ways. Climate, healthcare, crime, the education. We created all those schools that are now called P-Tech and those kinds of things. There's 200 schools around the world. But all those things were part of that initiative. So that's how we did it. But it was, it came out, the root, what we're trying to solve for is what does IBM stand for? Now the the ThinkPad really is gone. What does IBM stand for? And then we wanted to be the leader in enterprise tech, not consumer tech, right? Because that's what our core was, always enterprise. And that got us to Smarter Plan. John Arata, to be honest, John Arata was the head of marketing communications that worked with me at the time, because he's teaching now at Yale. He's the genius. He and Shelley Lazarus of all the two geniuses that brought that thing together. And she's, as you know, Columbia graduate.
Absolutely. Yeah. Great alum. So I think some of those same issues that were behind Smarter Planet have continued to be interests of yours in your post-IBM career, right? Maybe you could tell us a little bit about what your interests are these days.
Yeah, I mean, what happened was, as we went through all these things, when I was retiring, everybody's looking for things to do, right? And I didn't want to do the traditional things that people tend to do, private equity, whatever, that kind of stuff. I mean, I do a lot of VC investing with Jim, who's a friend of mine, but I'm not one of these big firms or that kind of thing. But anyway, and I didn't want to go into government for lots of reasons. I spent a lot of time in government doing these commissions and things, and I just felt that I was not the right personality for politics and political environments, But not that I wasn't willing to serve. I could do cyber, I could do national security, I could do other things without being part of that crazy system that goes on. It's gotten even crazier now than when I was retiring. So basically, we felt that, I really believe this then, and I believe it a lot today as well, quite honestly. It segments by different parts of the world. But if I said generally, what's the belief? Generally, it's different by the United States and Europe and Africa and places like that, or Asia. But generally, my belief was that young people were not being prepared for the world they were going to go face, right? And think about the pandemic. Go through all the professional education, as good as it in the States is the best, as we all know, right? We work with all those universities around, the top universities around the world, Peking University. We work with IIT, we work with NCI, et cetera, as part of the think tank. But anyway, great Columbia, great schools. All great schools. So Stanford, no issues. But think about was anybody prepared for this? Was anybody prepared for 08? Was anybody prepared for these rapid shifts in social expectation? And they're not. And we had a view that fundamentally, we're not trying to replace a professional school of any kind, an engineering school or a business school, what have you. It's more about trying to get people prepared for real world experiences that they're going to face as they enter this world of, let's say, in this, my case, business, or even government, the issues they're going to have to manage through. And so that led to us creating this thing called the Center for Global Enterprise. Now, remember, in those days when we created this thing, I think we launched it in 13, because my last year was 12 as chair. Our CEO was done in 2011, but I took my time as a chairman to think about how to structure this thing and hire some people to get it going, which we did, and then we launched it. I left IBM, but the point of it was that we just felt that there's a way we can create knowledge and share knowledge, and nonprofit, share knowledge in all these different areas to help people get prepared. And the methodology that we used was a little bit different. We would convene meetings. Our first one was in China with Peking University. The second was in California with Stanford. We would invite, say, 15 large CEOs. In China, they were half state-owned enterprises, half private enterprises, but mixed, not just state-owned enterprises, but sponsored by the Chinese government, because you can't get them there if you don't. But I still had the relationships with the people there to do that. But anyway, and then the university would have the professors there, a subset of the professors, obviously, like you got 3 or 4 you guys, whatever, based upon the subject matter. And then we would have this session and ask them at the end, we'd have a premise, but at the end, tell us where we should focus the research. And we went all around the world. Like I said, we went to China, then we did California, we went to North America, then we did in Europe, we did the Middle East, and then we did India, et cetera, et cetera. And then by the end of this, we probably had, 250, 160 inputs, and 150 to 160 inputs in the thing. And we had a worldwide conference, and that's set, and we did that in southern China, but that set the agenda for the research and the areas that they were focused on. And there's 4 institutes within it, and I don't get all that detail, but fundamentally that's what set the agenda. And then we started, obviously you fund the research, as you know, Paul, and you get smart people, hopefully, to help you do that, right? We always try to team with an academic partner, because we don't have the resource. We'll hire a good leader, we call the managing director, to kind of has that background, as a subject matter expert. But we rely on the academic establishment. We're not creating our own. We're not Peterson or someplace like that. We're pretty small, but we can work with your colleagues, and they're always. I tell you, one of the things I find fascinating. We did this thing. We were developing African women entrepreneurs. We've done about 400 now. Right, AWAC it's called. We're starting another wave. People that teach love to help out. You have guys, professors that want to be mentors for these ladies. You have deans of business school that want to help out. So we just reach out to our colleagues and say, hey, would you help us put together the curriculum? They do that for free in their time. They're all willing to give back. And so it's been really, I'm shocked at how easy it is to do those sorts of things. The other thing I'm shocked by is we don't advertise this stuff. We put something up on the internet. We have 2 people that evaluate the applications for 200 seats. We'll get 7,000 or 8,000 applications. Right? It's insane. But people that are, they're, think about it. They're underserved. They don't have access to the same establishments we have in the United States or in Europe, quite honestly. These ladies, they're supporting their families. They're coming off a co-op. They're trying to start a for-profit business to feed their families and their extended families, right? And that's our constituency. They don't have time to go to a professional school and get an MBA or something. Right. So that's how we do it.
Well, I'd love to ask you more about that, but I know that there's a bunch of students eager to get some questions in, so I'm gonna leave some time for them to ask some questions. So I guess Emily, are you gonna moderate that?
Yep. So just a reminder to all the participants, if you would like to ask your question yourself, you can use the raise your hand function and we will call on you. But we do have some questions in the chat, so I'll start with those. So a few different questions relating to cloud. So first one is talking about how did you come up with the original cloud business strategy? And they say, and make a decision to not go for it in a quote big way.
Well, what happened was we first started our collaboration with Google on a high-speed interconnect for horizontal infrastructure. We never called it cloud, I think it was in 07 or 08, right? So the technology platform we were investing in, and we pulled a lot of the resources out of the line organizations into corporate to get the platform, the technology built. So a combination of the research people and the software people, because I believed at the time it wasn't getting the focus it required to really go scale it, right? Now, I mean, I retired, right? So I have an opinion, but I can't support it with any of my facts. But I know enough about large organizations. What happens is that, if you think about it, what I did was sort of abrupt. I took very talented people and took them out of their organizations and had them report into an organization where corporate need could focus it, right? Well, when I left, everybody said, I want those people back. They're like the best people we have. And so therefore, my guess, and again, this is speculation on my part, they went back into the units where the units have a lot of short-term pressures. They got to make budgets, obviously. They need to produce earnings and those sorts of things. So the talent migrated into shorter-term projects, still technology development, but shorter-term, not longer-term, is my view. But I don't know the details about what happened. The other reason is I really do believe, we believed back then that the model for enterprise was going to be a hybrid model, not the classic cloud as it started, not what it is today. Remember when it started, it was mostly just app dev. It wasn't production. It wasn't doing real work. Maybe you're downloading music and that kind of stuff or videos, but we're not talking about doing like currency trading or that kind of stuff, or complicated healthcare systems with AI diagnostics, what have you, or confidential data into this public cloud. But it's all changed, but that's what it was back then. So you also had the fact that, and it wasn't enterprise ready at that point in time. That doesn't mean we shouldn't have made it enterprise ready. We could have made it enterprise ready. That's a whole different thing. But I think you take those two factors, talent movement, it wasn't enterprise ready quite yet. And IBM was late. I mean, and that's why they spent $36 billion on Red Hat. I mean, why would you do that if you weren't late? There's no other way to explain $36 billion for that asset.
Okay, so there was a follow-up question on your personal thoughts on SoftLayer and Red Hat acquisitions.
Well, I mean, the technology is fine. It's a question of price. The reason I bring up price is because that just puts pressure on the organization. And it's about, quite honestly, to do those large we never did a large acquisition. I won't bore you with the reasons why. We analyzed thousands of them, right? We just chose not to do one because they're really hard to integrate, but put that aside. And in tech, you can go through the history of tech. We couldn't find one large tech large acquisition that integrated well, Compaq, HP. They didn't integrate well. They never end well. AT Kearney, ED. I can go through all this stuff. Anyway, so we went through every one of them. And we didn't think we were smarter than the other guys. But the problem with it is the leverage on the balance sheet. Because when we retired myself in the CFO, there was zero core debt in IBM. The only debt we had was financing our own inventory in our credit company. It was zero core debt. Now there's like 42 billion core debt, right? So, and a lion's share of that has come recently with those large acquisitions. So now the good news is, as you know, money's free, thank goodness, right? So it takes some of the pressure off the income statement when you have money's free. And, I'm not talking about PPP. I'm just saying, rates are so low and they've been low for a while. But the problem with the pressure on the balance sheet for the students on the phone, that means execution has to be even better. So take something that's extremely hard to do, integrate these large technology entities because the cultures are so different, and then put stress in the financial system. And so therefore your execution has to be superior, not just, like be student stuff, right? I used to say that when people would come to me with a strategy, I used to say, it was from Sam Walton, a quote from Sam Walton, who became one of the richest people in the world before he gave his money away to his kids, right? Because I want B-level students running my stores. I don't want Nobel Prize scholars. I don't want Phi Beta Kappas. I want we'll give them the tools so they can perform like Phi Beta Kappa, but I don't want them doing my stores. Because I want success based on a skill set that your average person can do, right? And I'm serious about that. You don't want to pick things that you have to have geniuses to do because the risk of execution is just so high. And you might get one moonshot, but you might have 50 that fail. So Paul, we're talking about research, right? I mean, that's the nature of the beast. It's like punching holes in the ground if you're an oil company. So you punch a lot of holes before you hit a real well, right? So anyway, That's kind of my philosophy. It could be wrong. I mean, people talk about, they take these geniuses, make them great product engineers, and incredible things happen. Well, in my day, there was one Bill Gates and there was one Steve Jobs, right? I can't name any others. Nobody else can. It's like franchise quarterbacks in the NFL. There's like 6 from 32 teams. There's not 32 franchise quarterbacks. So you can't have a management system designed around having a franchise quarterback or Steve Jobs or Bill Gates, right?
So I think we have a couple of hands raised. Let's see. So Gus, if you want to ask your question, and then I think we might have one more. Gus, you are on mute still.
Gus is still muted. There he goes.
Yeah. Hi, Sam.
Hey, Gus.
You established the integrated account program in IBM. I think it'd be of interest to everyone what that was, why you did it, and whether you felt that was successful or not.
Well, I mean, I tell you, I'll tell you the why we did it, and then I think it's more interesting, the management lesson for the students as to how we did it. I mentioned this problem earlier when I talked about integrating IBM and bringing the leadership together, Gus, which was that we had all these silos in the customers and large accounts. These large accounts, I mean, if you add up the 100 largest accounts in IBM, I know it sounds crazy when I say this because we were 105 billion, 40% of revenue is 100 accounts. We had accounts that were over $1 billion a year. And they didn't want all these people just showing up, so they'd have to be the integrator for all these people. And they were right. We should just bring them, we should know them well enough to bring them solutions that solve their problems versus them have to manage our resources to figure out how to solve their problems, right? So that's how it all began. And we didn't do 100 right away. I think the first wave was 60. But I also think I was trying to do at the same time, which isn't it? So one was be responsive to your clients and your most important clients. You know, that was the most important thing for us. And that's why we did it. The other thing it allowed me to do, which I was trying to break down the pricing silos so we can give the customers an integrated IBM price, not 18 different piece parts that you add up, and it was a non-competitive solution because the costs were too high because everybody's trying to make profit on the thing. And so what we did was I wrote a letter to those 60 managing directors of those accounts and said, I'm delegating these authorities to you from me, the CEO. You now have the authority to do the following things, which was not popular with the staff organizations, needless to say. I wasn't saying take a leave of risk or lose money. I mean, no, none of that. But, you have the authority, you can set the price for an integrated IBM solution. And oh, by the way, here's the target margins we expect as you do that. But whether you make it in hardware, software, services, we're not going to beat you up for that. You just deliver what the IBM economics should do. So there were control mechanisms, but I wanted to signal to the system, we're getting rid of all this bureaucracy. I called it lower the center of gravity, and that was the first step in lowering the center of gravity. Get it out of corporate headquarters, move it down where it matters. It's closest to the field, which is the customer. Solve the customers, made them faster to respond if we did it. And they were very successful. The other thing we did, we paid them basically on how the customer would score them, right? So 15% of their compensation was tied to, it was a 3-year plan. So it didn't help you to optimize a year and then leave and go into different accounts. A 3-year plan, and the customer scored your performance on how they were serving you. I learned that in services when I first got there in services, and we asked our largest customers like Sears and people like that. Some of these people aren't around anymore, but anyway, how we should pay our lead people in their accounts, and that's how we designed that system. So they were the things: client sensitivity, be faster to respond, minimize the bureaucracy, and pay them on the interest of the people that they serve. It worked. I mean, it worked. I mean, it worked for many. We got up to 100 at one point in time. But it was, I convinced people that were division presidents to take the job. I took a guy who was a division president and put him over to work on a very, very large telco. And he did it for like 5 years and did very well.
So I thought it worked well.
Thank you.
So Sabrina will be our last question, and then we'll close out.
Awesome. Hi, Mr. Palmisano. Thank you so much for being here. It was great to hear about your humble beginnings and how a D3 schools still set you up for success. I went to Middlebury College with your son. He was my year. So please tell him I say hi.
Which one, Alex, Sam, or Carrie, my daughter? We had 3 of them.
Sam Palmo.
Sam, okay, I will.
Yeah, I was just messaging him on Instagram. So my burning question is, I'm at Google and I hear from executives like you and executives there the importance of globalization and being an executive who goes abroad and then brings that back to the US. And so I see you're a straight shooter. What I really want to know is, if for our generation and folks like us who are in an MBA program leaving, looking to go further our careers, which do you think is the new market to go into? So Europe is pretty mature. Is Asia still the market to go to? Are there pockets there? Is it the Middle East? Is it LATAM?
No, I tell you what, the world's complicated today, right? It was simple when I went to Asia, right? Because you could see that the spend that was going to be occurring, not just in IT, but basically you see per capita income going. We studied all this stuff for China and India and all these places. But as per capita income grows, you create industries like education, healthcare, distribution, not just banking, telco, which all emerging countries have. So you could see the spaces of opportunity, obviously, and you could go to those spaces. Politically, the world's become more complicated today because of these factions that are pushing an agenda of regionalization. The reason why I think it's not going to be as successful as they all hope is because of young people like yourself don't see the world that way. You don't see the world that way. You don't see the world by tax boundary, right? You don't see the world. You want to help people get advanced, so you want to lift everybody in globalization. You don't want to leave people behind, but it doesn't say you only want to lift people that vote for you in globalization. It says you want to lift everybody. It's your generation. You want to take care of everybody. Well, that's what we thought about too in IBM. And so I got to answer your question before I tell my Indian story. I'll take too much time, but I think fundamentally, if you look at, now this is really extreme, but if you watch what's going on in Africa, it's quite interesting, quite honestly. It's very interesting. And there's still a lot of foreign direct investment going into Africa. Now, that's a different environment than me going to Tokyo with my family, okay, right? There's the healthcare systems, the economic opportunities in a larger company like Google are fine. Google's going to take care of all those things, but to go run out there on your own, there's a lot more risk, needless to say, right? But if IBM or Google or Facebook or whomever, the leaders today would be, Amazon, et cetera, for AWS, let's say. I don't know so much the retail business. To me, it's quite interesting, and I think it's a long-term play. I'd go back to Asia, India, as well. It's not going to be as affected by what's going on politically in the short term. I do believe that these things do pass, these phases of that. But I'll tell you one story. I think one of the most impactful meetings I've ever attended was in IBM India, when I challenged the general manager of IBM India at the time that if he became the largest IT company in India, we were going to have a meeting and host all the people we had hired and welcome them to IBM. Now, remember, we were hiring like 1,000 people a month in India. So I knew it was going to be between 50 or 60,000 by the time he got there. Well, the guy actually did it. The team did it. I shouldn't say he did it. But so we had to have this meeting, and we had the prime minister. We invited the prime minister. We had this worldwide broadcast. We had the president. We had this Bollywood there introducing everybody, dressing with us in the green room. She was pretty cool. Anyway, put all that aside. We had to build our own facility like the Olympics. We put a road in. We had to air condition it. We had to feed these people. We had buses. But the point of the whole thing was literally, I'm walking through this crowd, and we could only fit like 15,000 in the facility, but we had hotels with satellites all over the country with the rest of the people in these hotels, these satellites, plus the worldwide broadcast going on. People were coming up to me saying that, what we did changed their lives, and that's when you talk about why is it worthwhile to do these things other than, you make some money and all that sort of stuff. We touched, at the end of the day, we had hired like 100,000 people there by the time I retired, and we changed the lives of most of those people. Because of skills, education, paid them better benefits, all the things that matter in life. So I have a bias that you can do things in the world that are good for business and good for social responsibility, and quite honestly, make you feel better at the same time. Now, as I said that, as we were doing all this stuff, remember what I said before, IBM had record earnings in 9, 10, 11, and 12, you know, so we didn't trade a lot off financially. We just made it all work. The other thing is the benefit of going overseas, you know, at the right stage of your life, because it varies. I mean, you have other personal considerations. You can have aging parents, whatever it happens to be. It's not that simple, I understand. But the benefit of going to those kinds of things, which you will learn about different cultures and different societies, and it's so fast, it's more than you can ever get. So I went to Columbia University. It's a diverse student population. You know, yeah, I get it. You know, I mean, everybody's here from all over the world, which is true. It's wonderful. But put yourself in IBM Japan where there are 2 Gaijin and 25,000 Japanese, and you don't speak the language. That's called immersion. Okay, right? I mean, you will come out of there a different person than when you entered. I guarantee you that. So that's my point. Of you really do. I mean, if you can have the capability and timing's right in life, do it. You know, I would definitely do it.
Thank you so much. And please tell Sam I say hello. It's Sabrina from Middlebury.
As soon as we get off the phone.
Yeah, Sabrina from Middlebury, yeah. Montenegro.
And his fiance is Tessa Halbert.
Yes, of course.
And my daughter's Carrie. And my Alex. Well. Yeah. If you add up all the Palmisanos that now are either getting married or are married or first cousins, there were 11 that graduated from Middlebury.
Yep.
So,
yeah.
There were a lot
Small
of them.
world.
Small world. Then they go to Columbia. Architectural school or business school.
Had to have them.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much, Sam, and thank you, Professor Glasserman, for an amazing discussion and conversation. And thank you to all of the attendees for joining tonight. The next Leadership Speaker Series session will be Monday, July 13th at 8 p.m. We'll see you then. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thanks. And thanks so much, Sam.
Guys. Oh, thank you, Paul. Thank you, Emily. It was great fun.